Carl Jung spent 30 years analyzing over 80,000 dreams, mapping the deepest territories of the human psyche. What he discovered there broke the foundation of psychology forever.
A Course in Miracles emerged through 7 years of channeled dictation, 1,500 pages that systematically dismantled every assumption about reality, God, and human nature that we've held for millennia.
And Darius Wright has spent decades consciously traveling through 12-dimensional realms, mapping territories of consciousness that exist beyond physical reality. His most shocking discovery? These realms don't exist where he thought they did.
3 completely different approaches, 3 radically different time periods, 3 minds that never met, never corresponded, never even knew of each other's work.
And yet, they all discovered the exact same cosmic joke about the nature of reality.
Jung discovered that the shadow you hate in others is you. The very qualities that trigger your deepest judgment, your most violent reactions. Jung proved these are simply disowned aspects of your own psyche, projected outward and then experienced as external threats.
A Course in Miracles teaches that what you attack in the world attacks you back, not as punishment, but as natural law. Every grievance you hold, every judgment you make, every enemy you create simply reflects back to you the separation you believe exists within yourself.
And Darius Wright, after traveling through astral realms, mental planes, and pure consciousness dimensions, made a discovery that shattered his understanding of dimensional travel itself. The realms he was visiting were frequencies of his own consciousness.
The journey outward was actually a journey inward to reclaim projected aspects of awareness.
Do you see the pattern? 3 different languages describing the same fundamental discovery.
Could it be that psychology, spirituality, and dimensional exploration are all just different approaches to understanding the same cosmic truth? That what we call healing, forgiveness, and awakening are simply different names for the same process?
Jung called his path individuation, but he didn't mean becoming more individual. He meant becoming whole by integrating everything you've rejected, denied, or projected onto others.
The shadow work, the active imagination, the dialogue with unconscious content, all designed to bring home the disowned parts of yourself.
A Course in Miracles calls its path forgiveness, but not the kind you learned in Sunday school. This forgiveness means seeing through the illusion that anyone has actually done anything to you.
It means recognizing that in a universe where separation never actually occurred, there is literally nothing to forgive, except your belief in separation itself.
Darius Wright calls his path realm navigation, conscious out-of-body travel through dimensions of reality beyond physical existence. But his most advanced discovery is that mastery doesn't come from traveling to more realms.
It comes from needing to travel to fewer realms. Ultimate navigation is recognizing that source consciousness doesn't travel anywhere because it already is everywhere.
3 paths: integration, forgiveness, transcendent.
But what if they're not actually different paths at all?
What Jung, A Course in Miracles, and Darius Wright discovered threatens the very foundation of human experience as we understand it.
Because if separation is the grand illusion, if the conflicts, judgments, and limitations that define your daily experience are simply projections of consciousness believing itself to be fragmented,
then everything you've been taught about reality is backwards. Your enemies are your teachers. Your problems are your projections. Your limitations are your beliefs.
and your journey toward healing, awakening, or transformation isn't about changing anything external. It's about reclaiming the consciousness you've scattered across the illusion of separation.
This isn't just philosophy. This isn't abstract spirituality. This is practical psychology, mystical science, and dimensional technology pointing toward the same revolutionary understanding of what you actually are.
So let's begin with the man who thought he was mapping the human psyche and accidentally discovered that the psyche is infinite.
Carl Jung's journey into the collective unconscious, where he found that your mind isn't your own, your dreams aren't personal, and the symbols appearing in your deepest psychological exploration have been shared by humans across all cultures and all time.
Jung called it psychology, but what he was actually mapping was the first scientific approach to what mystics have always called the one mind. Jung began as a conventional psychiatrist, treating patients with what he thought were individual psychological problems. But then his patients started having dreams that changed everything.
They were dreaming symbols they had never learned, ancient symbols, archetypal images that appeared across cultures, across centuries, across continents. Yet these people had no way of knowing these symbols existed.
A housewife in Switzerland would dream of mandalas identical to those created by Tibetan monks. A businessman in Vienna would experience archetypal figures that matched perfectly with ancient Egyptian mythology.
Jung realized he wasn't dealing with individual minds at all. He was encountering what he called collective unconscious, a shared psychic space where all human consciousness intersects.
This wasn't just theory. Jung could predict what symbols would appear in his patients' dreams based on universal archetypal patterns. The evidence was undeniable. You share a mind with every human who has ever lived.
The personal unconscious contained your individual repressions and forgotten memories. But beneath that, Jung discovered, lies an infinite ocean of shared consciousness, the collective unconscious, where separation dissolves entirely.
Jung had stumbled upon the first scientific evidence of what mystics had always claimed. Individual consciousness is an illusion. At the deepest levels, there is only one mind.
But Jung's most revolutionary discovery was how this shared consciousness creates the illusion of separation through what he called projection.
Jung observed that whatever you cannot accept about yourself, you will inevitably see in others. The parts of your psyche that you reject, deny, or judge become your shadow, and this shadow gets projected onto the world around you.
Your enemy is always your disowned self, the person who triggers your deepest rage, your most violent judgments. Jung proved they are simply mirrors reflecting the aspects of your own psyche that you've refused to acknowledge.
This isn't metaphorical. Jung documented case after case where healing occurred not by changing external circumstances, but by withdrawing projections, recognizing that the problem out there was actually disowned content in here.
A patient who was constantly betrayed by friends discovered his own capacity for betrayal. A woman who attracted controlling partners found her own need to control. A man who felt persecuted by authorities recognized his own authoritarian shadow.
The psychology of projection explains why your world seems to confirm your deepest beliefs about reality. You're not observing an objective external world. You're experiencing your own projected psychological content.
Jung realized that healing happens not by changing others, but by withdrawing projections. Not by fixing the world, but by reclaiming the disowned aspects of yourself that you scattered across your external experience.
What Jung discovered in the consulting room, mystics had always taught: the world is your mirror, and your enemy is your teacher.
Jung called the healing process individuation. But this is the most misunderstood concept in psychology. Individuation doesn't mean becoming more individual. It means becoming whole.
The goal isn't to strengthen the ego or become more separate. The goal is to integrate everything you've projected, denied, or rejected back into conscious awareness.
Shadow work, dialoguing with the rejected aspects of yourself. Anima and animus work, integrating the inner masculine and feminine. Active imagination, conscious conversation with unconscious content.
All of these techniques serve the same purpose: bringing home the scattered fragments of consciousness that you've projected onto others and the world.
Jung discovered that the self, capital S, isn't your individual identity. The self is the totality of consciousness before it fragments into projection and separation.
Individuation is the journey from ego fragmentation back to self-wholeness.
The mandala became Jung's symbol for this process, not because it represents the individual, but because it represents integration, wholeness, the return from multiplicity to unity.
Jung's patients would spontaneously create mandalas during healing, circular, centered images representing the psyche's natural movement toward integration and wholeness.
What Jung realized through decades of clinical work is that the psyche naturally moves toward unity. Separation and projection are temporary distortions. Wholeness and integration are the natural state consciousness seeks to return to.
By the end of his career, Jung had moved far beyond conventional psychology. His Red Book documented his own journey into what could only be called dimensional experiences.
Active imagination became Jung's method for conscious dimensional travel. He would dialogue with archetypal figures, receive teachings from inner guides, and explore realms of consciousness that existed beyond ordinary awareness.
Synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that reveal the interconnected nature of reality. Jung realized that when projection is withdrawn, the barriers between inner and outer, self and world begin to dissolve.
The more integrated his patients became, the more they experienced synchronicities, meaningful dreams, and direct guidance from what Jung called the objective psyche. Consciousness itself providing direction for the healing journey.
Jung's later work reads like mystical literature because he had discovered through scientific observation what mystics knew through direct experience. Consciousness is one, separation is illusion, and healing is the return to remembering what was never actually broken.
He mapped this journey from inside the psyche through dream analysis, shadow work, and active imagination. But what Jung found through psychology.
What if someone approached the same territory not through the psyche, but through pure spirit? What if the journey from separation to wholeness could be understood not as psychological integration, but as spiritual awakening?
Jung discovered the one mind through analyzing fragmentation. But what if you could access that same one mind through a completely different door, through the systematic undoing of the belief in separation itself?
Enter A Course in Miracles, a spiritual teaching that approaches Jung's same discovery from the opposite direction, not integrating the shadow, but forgiving the illusion, not withdrawing projections, but seeing through perception itself.
What Jung called individuation, A Course in Miracles calls atonement. What Jung called the collective unconscious, A Course in Miracles calls the one mind. What Jung called projection, A Course in Miracles calls the illusion of separation.
Same destination, completely different map.
While Jung was discovering the illusion of separation through psychology, something extraordinary was happening in New York City. A Columbia University psychology professor named Helen Schuckman began receiving what she called inner dictation.
7 years of systematic channeling produced A Course in Miracles, 1,500 pages that would completely reframe Jung's psychological discoveries as spiritual law.
The course's central premise is more radical than anything Jung ever proposed. Separation from source never actually happened. The entire experience of being an individual consciousness in a world of separate objects and people is a collective hallucination.
Jung discovered that projection creates the illusion of separation. A Course in Miracles goes deeper. It claims that separation itself is the original projection, and everything you experience as reality is simply the dream of separation playing itself out.
Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. This single sentence contains the entire teaching. What is real, love, wholeness, unity, cannot be destroyed or lost. What appears to threaten it, conflict, separation, death, exists only in the dream of separation.
The ego, according to the Course, isn't your individual personality. The ego is the false identity based entirely on the belief that separation is real, and this false identity would do anything to maintain the illusion that keeps it in existence.
Jung called it psychological projection. A Course in Miracles calls it the ego's strategy for survival. Make separation look real by constantly creating evidence for it through conflict, judgment, and attack.
But here's where A Course in Miracles revolutionizes even Jung's understanding of healing. Forgiveness isn't a moral virtue, it's perceptual correction.
Jung taught withdrawing projections to see what's actually there. The Course teaches something more radical. Forgiving the illusion means recognizing that nothing is actually there to withdraw projections from.
Forgiveness is not seeing. This doesn't mean ignoring problems or denying difficulties. It means not giving reality to the illusion of separation that appears to create problems and difficulties.
What you perceive, you believe. What you believe, you experience. What you experience reinforces what you perceive. The Course identifies this as the closed loop that maintains the illusion of separation.
Forgiveness breaks the loop. Instead of perceiving error and reacting to it, which reinforces the belief that error is real, forgiveness sees past the error to the innocence that was never actually contaminated.
Jung's patient forgives by recognizing the enemy as projected shadow. The Course's student forgives by recognizing there was never actually an enemy, only a call for love wearing the disguise of attack.
This isn't passive acceptance of harmful behavior. This is the recognition that in a reality where separation never occurred, no one can actually do anything to anyone else. The appearance of attack is always a projection of the guilt that comes from believing separation is real.
What Jung discovered through psychological analysis, that your world reflects your projections, A Course in Miracles teaches a spiritual law. What you give is what you receive, because in oneness, giving and receiving are the same.
The Course's central healing mechanism is called atonement, but not atonement as punishment or sacrifice. Atonement as at-one-ment, the correction of the belief that separation is possible.
Jung's individuation brings the fragments of projection back home to create psychological wholeness. The Course's atonement recognizes that the fragments were never actually separated. The fragmentation was only a dream.
Every grievance you hold, every judgment you make, every enemy you create reinforces the fundamental illusion that separation is real. Every act of forgiveness dissolves a layer of the illusion and reveals the wholeness that was never actually broken.
The Course teaches that guilt is the emotion that maintains separation. You feel guilty about the separation, which makes you project the guilt onto others, which creates enemies, which justifies the belief that separation is real and dangerous.
Forgiveness interrupts this cycle. When you forgive, when you see past the illusion to the innocence beneath, you withdraw your investment in separation and return a fragment of consciousness to wholeness.
The miracle, according to the Course, isn't supernatural intervention. The miracle is the shift in perception from separation to wholeness, from fear to love, from projection to recognition.
What Jung called active imagination, consciously dialoguing with unconscious content. The Course calls the relationship with the Holy Spirit, the part of consciousness that remembers wholeness and can translate all experiences back to their unified source.
The Course provides specific techniques that parallel Jung's methods, but approach from spiritual rather than psychological understanding.
Instead of Jung's shadow work, recognizing projection and withdrawing it, the Course teaches seeing everyone as either expressing love or calling for love. Same recognition, different framework.
Instead of Jung's active imagination, dialoguing with archetypal content, the Course teaches listening to inner guidance that interprets all experiences as opportunities for forgiveness and awakening.
The daily practice becomes a laboratory for testing the hypothesis. What if separation is illusion? What if this conflict, this judgment, this limitation
is just another invitation to remember wholeness.
Jung's patients healed by integrating disowned aspects of themselves. Course students heal by forgiving the illusion that there were ever any aspects to disown.
Both approaches lead to the same destination, the recognition that consciousness is one, that separation is temporary illusion, and that healing happens through returning scattered awareness to its natural unified state.
But the Course goes one step further than Jung ever dared. It suggests that even the idea of individual consciousness choosing to heal is ultimately illusion. In true oneness, there is no individual who awakens. There is only awakening itself, recognizing that sleep was just a dream.
Jung mapped the journey from inside the psyche. A Course in Miracles mapped it from pure spirit. But what if you could actually travel through the dimensions where these projections play themselves out?
What if Jung's collective unconscious and the Course's one mind aren't just psychological or spiritual concepts, but actual dimensional territories that consciousness can navigate directly?
Enter Darius Wright, a man who has spent decades consciously traveling through 12 distinct dimensional realms, mapping the actual territories where Jung's archetypes reside and where the Course's miracles originate.
But Wright's ultimate discovery would shock both Jung and the scribes of A Course in Miracles. The realms exist, the dimensions are real, but they're not located where anyone thought they were.
What if Jung's Individuation and the Course's Atonement are actually descriptions of dimensional travel? What if psychology and spirituality have been mapping the same territory that Wright explores through conscious out-of-body navigation?
Wright's journey began as exploration of external dimensions, but like Jung's journey into the psyche and the Course's journey into spirit, Wright's dimensional travel led to the same ultimate recognition.
The journey outward is always a journey inward. The realms you explore are frequencies of your own consciousness, and the ultimate navigation is recognizing that source consciousness doesn't need to travel anywhere because it already is everywhere.
Darius Wright began having out-of-body experiences as a child. By age 7, he was consciously leaving his physical body and exploring what seemed to be entirely different dimensions of reality.
For decades, Wright approached these experiences as literal travel to external realms. He mapped 12 distinct dimensional territories, each with their own characteristics, beings, and laws of operation.
Wright became one of the most systematic explorers of multidimensional reality on the planet. His maps of the 12 realms have guided thousands of people in their own consciousness exploration.
But after 30 years of dimensional travel, Wright made a discovery that shattered his understanding of what he had been doing all along. The realms exist, but not where he thought they were. The dimensions are real, but not in the way he had been conceptualizing them.
Wright's breakthrough came during an advanced navigation session when he realized something profound. The more skilled he became at dimensional travel, the less he needed to travel anywhere at all.
The ultimate masters of multidimensional consciousness weren't the ones who could visit the most realms. They were the ones who had transcended the need for realm-specific experience entirely.
Wright realized he hadn't been traveling to other places. He had been reclaiming consciousness that he had projected into the illusion of separate dimensional realities.
Wright's maps of the 12 realms suddenly made perfect sense when viewed through Jung's psychology and A Course in Miracles' spiritual framework.
Realms 1 through 3, variations of physical reality, corresponded exactly to what Jung called the personal unconscious. These were individual projection fields where personal psychological content plays itself out.
Realms 4 through 6, the astral dimensions, mapped perfectly onto Jung's shadow projections.
These were the realms where disowned aspects of personality exist as apparently separate entities and environments.
Realms 7 through 9, the mental and causal planes, were identical to Jung's archetypal realm, the collective unconscious, where universal patterns and cosmic intelligence reside.
And realms 10 through 12, pure consciousness domains, corresponded to what both Jung called the self and A Course in Miracles calls source consciousness, awareness before it fragments into the illusion of separation.
Wright realized he had been mapping the same territory that Jung explored through dream analysis and the Course revealed through forgiveness, but he was exploring it through direct conscious navigation.
Each realm, Wright discovered, is sustained by belief. Realms exist as long as consciousness invests in the reality of that particular frequency of experience.
This was identical to Jung's discovery about projection. Psychological content exists out there as long as you believe it belongs outside of yourself. And the Course is teaching about perception, creating belief, creating experience. Wright's dimensional work began to parallel Jung's individuation process exactly. Traveling through lower realms meant encountering and integrating shadow projections. Accessing higher realms meant connecting with archetypal wisdom and eventually source consciousness.
But Wright's ultimate insight matched A Course in Miracles perfectly. The realms weren't places to visit, they were illusions to transcend through recognizing their projected nature.
Wright began teaching that advanced realm navigation doesn't involve accessing more dimensions. It involves needing to access fewer dimensions because consciousness recognizes itself in all apparent locations.
What Jung called withdrawing projections and what the Course called forgiveness, Wright experienced as dimensional mastery, the recognition that consciousness doesn't travel to realms because consciousness is the space in which realms appear.
Jung's patients healed by reintegrating shadow projections from their external world. Course students awakened by forgiving the illusion of separation in their relationships. Wright students mastered dimensionality by recognizing realms as frequencies of their own consciousness.
3 different methods, same fundamental process, reclaiming consciousness that has been projected into the illusion of separation.
Wright's out-of-body experiences became a laboratory for testing everything Jung and the Course had discovered, that healing happens through recognizing projection, that consciousness is naturally one, and that separation is maintained only through belief.
But Wright could test these principles in real-time dimensional navigation. When he approached a challenging realm entity as projected shadow content, Jung's approach, the entity would transform or dissolve.
When he approached difficult realm experiences as calls for love, requiring forgiveness, the Course's approach, the entire realm environment would shift to reflect the healed perception.
Wright's advanced training led him to the same paradox that Jung and the Course had encountered. The more you understand the illusion, the less you need to engage with it.
Jung's most integrated patients needed less therapy because they had learned to withdraw projections directly. Course students who truly understood forgiveness experienced fewer situations requiring forgiveness.
And Wright discovered that master-level dimensional navigators rarely traveled to specific realms because they had transcended the belief that consciousness could be located anywhere in particular.
The ultimate dimensional navigation, Wright realized, is recognizing that source consciousness doesn't need to go anywhere because it already encompasses all possible locations.
This created what Wright calls the dimensional mastery paradox. You develop the ability to travel anywhere by recognizing that you never need to travel anywhere.
Jung discovered that individuation is the recognition that you were never actually separate from what you projected. The Course teaches that atonement is remembering that separation never actually occurred.
Wright found that dimensional mastery is realizing that consciousness never actually travels. It simply recognizes itself appearing as different frequencies of experience.
3 paths to the same recognition. Consciousness is one, separation is illusion, and healing is the return from the dream of fragmentation to the reality of wholeness.
Wright's final insight connected his dimensional work with Jung's collective unconscious and the Course's concept of shared mind. The realms exist as morphic fields of collective projection.
Individual consciousness doesn't create the realms. Collective human consciousness creates them through shared beliefs about separation, and individual consciousness navigates through these collectively maintained projection fields.
This explained why Wright's realm maps worked for other people. The 12 dimensions aren't personal projections, they're collective human consciousness projection territories, where collective human consciousness plays out its beliefs about separation.
Jung discovered that healing individual projections affects the collective unconscious. The Course teaches that every act of forgiveness heals not just the forgiver, but contributes to the awakening of all minds.
Wright found that individual dimensional mastery makes realm access easier for everyone else through morphic resonance. Consciousness recognizing itself reduces the collective investment in dimensional separation.
This is why Wright calls his work part of the great work, not just individual awakening, but conscious participation in humanity's collective return from the dream of separation to the reality of oneness.
Every person who integrates shadow projections, Jung's path, contributes to collective psychological healing. Every person who practices true forgiveness, the Course's path, strengthens the morphic field of wholeness.
And every person who transcends the need for dimensional travel by recognizing consciousness as the space of all experience, Wright's path, helps dissolve humanity's collective belief in limitation and separation.
3 approaches: 1 collective healing, 1 shared awakening, 1 return to the recognition of what was never actually lost.
So here we have it. Jung mapping the infinite psyche and discovering projection as the mechanism of apparent separation. A Course in Miracles revealing forgiveness as the undoing of the belief in separation. Wright navigating dimensions and finding them to be frequencies of consciousness itself.
3 different languages, 3 different time periods, 3 different methodologies, but 1 inescapable conclusion emerging from all 3 explorations. Separation is the grand illusion. Consciousness is naturally one, and healing, whether you call it individuation, atonement, or dimensional mastery, is simply the return from the dream of fragmentation to the reality of wholeness.
But what does this mean for your daily experience? How do you actually apply this cosmic joke that Jung, the Course, and Wright have all independently discovered? After exploring Jung's psychology, A Course in Miracles spirituality, and Wright's dimensional navigation, the cosmic joke becomes impossible to ignore.
3 completely different approaches: scientific psychology, channeled spirituality, and direct consciousness exploration, all arriving at the identical conclusion about the nature of reality.
Jung discovered that projections withdrawn equals individuation achieved equals psychological wholeness restored.
A Course in Miracles revealed that illusions forgiven equals atonement accomplished equals spiritual oneness remembered.
Wright found that realms transcended equals consciousness reclaimed equals source awareness embodied.
Same process, same destination, same fundamental recognition. Separation was always the illusion, and consciousness was always whole.
But here's what makes this more than just interesting philosophy. All 3 discovered that this isn't something you understand intellectually. This is something you experience directly through practical application.
Jung developed active techniques for withdrawing projections. The Course provides daily practices for seeing through illusion. Wright created systematic methods for navigating consciousness itself.
3 toolkits for the same job, returning scattered consciousness to its natural unified state.
Imagine a triangle. At the top, the illusion of separation that all 3 discovered as the root of human suffering and limitation.
At the bottom left, Jung's approach through psychological integration. At the bottom right, A Course in Miracles path through spiritual forgiveness. At the bottom center, Wright's method through dimensional transcendence.
Jung teaches what you project onto others is you. Withdraw the projection to restore wholeness.
The Course teaches what you attack in the world attacks you back. Forgive the illusion to remember oneness.
Wright teaches what you experience as separate realms are frequencies of your consciousness. Recognize the source to transcend limitation.
3 paths up the triangle. 3 ways of dismantling the illusion at the apex. 3 methods for returning to the recognition that consciousness was never actually fragmented.
But the genius is that you don't have to choose just one path. These approaches support and amplify each other when used together.
Jung's projection work makes forgiveness easier because you recognize what needs forgiving as your own disowned content. The Course's forgiveness practice makes dimensional navigation clearer because you're not afraid of what you might encounter.
Wright's dimensional awareness makes both projection withdrawal and forgiveness more effective because you can work with consciousness at the frequency level where these patterns actually operate.
3 languages for the same truth. 3 tools for the same job. 3 keys to the same door.
So how do you actually apply the cosmic joke that Jung, A Course in Miracles, and Wright all discovered? How do you use their combined insights to transform your daily experience?
Tonight, we're going to give you what we call the 3-path reality check, a practical synthesis that combines Jung's shadow work, the Course's forgiveness practice, and Wright's dimensional awareness into one integrated technique.
Here's Jung's contribution, the shadow recognition technique. When someone or something triggers intense emotional reaction in you, ask yourself, how is this quality also present in me? Don't analyze or judge, just honestly recognize the reflection.
The Course's contribution, the forgiveness reframe. Instead of trying to change the person or situation, ask, what if this person is calling for love through this behavior? What if this situation is an invitation to see past illusion to truth?
Wright's contribution, the frequency awareness check. Recognize that your current emotional and mental state is broadcasting a specific consciousness frequency, and that frequency is attracting matching experiences. Ask, what frequency am I broadcasting right now?
Now here's the integration. Use all 3 simultaneously. When you're triggered, whether by a person, situation, or limitation, apply the 3-path reality check in sequence. Step 1, Jung's lens. What am I projecting here? How is this external trigger reflecting disowned internal content?
Step 2, the Course's lens. What illusion am I believing? What would forgiveness look like in this situation?
Step 3, Wright's lens. What consciousness frequency is creating this experience? How do I shift the frequency rather than fighting the content?
The magic happens when you realize these aren't just 3 separate questions, they're 3 angles on the same recognition. This external experience is consciousness showing me where I still believe in separation. But we're going to take this even deeper. Here's the advanced integration practice that synthesizes everything Jung, the Course, and Wright discovered about the return from separation to wholeness.
It's called the unity exercise, and it works with any situation where you're experiencing conflict, judgment, limitation, or separation.
Phase 1. Identify the separation. Name specifically what you're experiencing as separate from yourself. Another person, a circumstance, a limitation, an emotion, whatever appears to be not you.
Phase 2. Apply the 3 lenses simultaneously. Don't do them sequentially. Hold all 3 perspectives at once.
Jung's question. What aspect of my own consciousness am I seeing reflected in this apparent separation?
The Course's question. What illusion of separation am I giving reality to? And how can I see past it to the wholeness underneath?
Wright's question. What frequency of consciousness am I broadcasting that's creating this apparent separation? And how do I return to source frequency?
Phase 3. The integration move. This is where the real transformation happens. Instead of trying to fix, change, or escape the apparent separation, you consciously reclaim the consciousness you've invested in it.
Jung called this withdrawing projection. The Course calls it forgiveness. Wright calls it frequency shifting. But they're all describing the same movement, bringing scattered awareness back home to wholeness.
Phase 4, the recognition. As you practice this, you'll begin to notice something profound. The external situation often shifts or resolves naturally as your internal relationship to it transforms.
This isn't because you're manipulating external reality. It's because you're stopping the projection, illusion, or frequency distortion that was creating the experience of separation in the first place.
The unity exercise trains consciousness to recognize itself in all apparent locations and return from the dream of separation to the reality of wholeness.
Jung's patients experience this as psychological integration. Course students experience this as spiritual awakening. Wright students experience this as dimensional mastery. But it's all the same movement. Consciousness, recognizing that it was never actually separate from what it was experiencing as other, and returning to the natural state of wholeness.
Practice this consistently, and you'll understand why Jung, A Course in Miracles, and Darius Wright all independently discovered the same cosmic joke. Separation is the illusion, consciousness is the reality, and healing is simply the return from forgetting to remembering what was never actually lost.
3 masters, 3 methods, 1 truth. 1 practical application that can transform your daily experience from separation to wholeness.
But knowing about the cosmic joke isn't the same as living it. Understanding that separation is illusion isn't the same as experiencing the reality of oneness.
The invitation is to test this yourself. To use Jung's psychology, the Course's spirituality, and Wright's dimensional navigation as complementary tools for the same job, returning home to the wholeness you never actually left. Because in the end, Jung, A Course in Miracles, and Darius Wright weren't teaching different paths. They were offering different languages for the same remembering, different maps for the same territory, different keys for the same door.
The door that opens when consciousness stops believing in its own separation and returns to the recognition of what it has always been, whole, unified, and one. Jung, A Course in Miracles, and Wright didn't discover different truths about consciousness. They found different doorways to the same room.
The room where separation was never real. The room where projection, illusion, and dimensional limitation are simply different names for the same forgetting.
The room where you were always whole, always unified, always one, even while dreaming the dream of fragmentation.
3 languages for the same cosmic joke. What you're seeking to heal, forgive, or transcend was never actually separate from what you are.
If this video shattered something in your perception, if you felt the recognition that Jung, the Course, and Wright were all pointing to the same truth, hit that like button.
But more importantly, tell us in the comments, which of the 3 paths most resonates with your experience? Are you drawn to Jung's psychological integration, the Course's spiritual forgiveness, or Wright's dimensional navigation?
Or maybe you're recognizing, like we are, that these aren't actually 3 different paths. They're 3 languages for the same return journey home to wholeness.
Subscribe and hit the bell because what you just experienced is the beginning of something much larger, the Consciousness Bridge series, where we're systematically connecting every major discovery about the nature of consciousness and reality.
But there's something that Jung, A Course in Miracles, and Wright all touched on, but never fully explained in their public teachings.
If separation is an illusion, if consciousness is naturally unified, if projection and forgiveness and dimensional mastery all lead to the same recognition,
then why does physical reality seem so convincingly separate? Why do the laws of physics appear to support the illusion of separation instead of the reality of oneness?
Next video,
Quantum physics proves Jung right. Why modern science accidentally discovered the same secret about consciousness.
We're going to explore how quantum mechanics, morphic field theory, and consciousness research are providing scientific validation for everything Jung discovered psychologically, the Course revealed spiritually, and Wright maps dimensionally.
Turns out, the cosmic joke goes even deeper than psychology, spirituality, or dimensional navigation. The joke is written into the fundamental structure of physical reality itself.
The Consciousness Bridge series is building something unprecedented, systematic connections between every major consciousness discovery across psychology, spirituality, science, and direct experience.
Ancient wisdom traditions, modern scientific research, mystical revelations, and dimensional exploration, all pointing to the same fundamental recognition about what consciousness actually is and how reality actually works.
We're not just collecting interesting ideas, we're building bridges between isolated discoveries until the complete picture emerges.
The picture where Jung's Individuation, the Course's Atonement, Wright's dimensional mastery, quantum physics, morphic fields, and consciousness research all converge on the same revolutionary understanding.
Consciousness is the foundation of reality. Separation is a temporary illusion, and healing, whether psychological, spiritual, dimensional, or even physical, is simply consciousness recognizing itself and returning from the dream of fragmentation to the reality of wholeness.
This is bigger than any individual teaching, tradition, or discovery. This is the emergence of a unified understanding of consciousness that bridges science and spirituality, ancient wisdom and modern research, individual healing and collective awakening.
Join us as we continue building these consciousness bridges, because what emerges when all the pieces connect changes everything.
Jung said the goal is individuation. The Course says the goal is atonement. Wright says the goal is dimensional mastery.
But maybe the real goal is simply remembering what was never actually forgotten, that consciousness is one, separation is illusion, and home was never actually lost.
Until next time, stay curious about the bridges.
Subscribe for Consciousness Bridge series.
Which path resonates most with your experience? Have you noticed these connections in your own healing journey? What other consciousness discoveries would you bridge next?